Hello and welcome to a Control Engineering video interview. I'm David Miller, Content Manager at CFE Media and Technology, and today I'm going to be speaking with Jody Kinney, Product Manager at AutomationDirect, who will be discussing market trends and purchasing considerations to be made around industrial enclosures. Now, industrial enclosures are a critical product for automation, as our viewers most certainly know. Purchasing the correct enclosure is essential to ensuring the best possible performance and also the largest possible lifespan for sensitive electronic and computing components. On top of that, as Industry 4.0 continues to gain steam and more sensors and digital devices make their way onto hazardous plant floors and into other hazardous environments in the field as well, enclosures are set to become even more vital in the years to come than they have been in the past. So when I caught up with Jody, he had quite a bit to say about these topics and more. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and cut over to that interview with him now. Hello, Jody. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So I think it would be useful for us to start by discussing the ways in which the growth in smart manufacturing, by which of course I mean the use of more sophisticated electronic controls and other computing components, has, I imagine, increased the demand for enclosures due to the need, of course, to protect that equipment. So is this the case, and can you talk to me a little bit more about
it? You're right, but that's only part of the picture. It's not only the proliferation of the advancement of automation technology and the way it's gone, and there's just more field devices and more localized controls rather than one centralized drag every wire back into one cabinet. It's also just the overall fact that there's just more things being automated. Especially recently, and this is a lot of it's driven by tightening labor markets. Manufacturers when they have difficult times finding people to hire to work to make their widgets, they start looking for ways to automate it so they don't have to find those people. And there's a lot of things that have been driving that tight labor market, recently. You've got everything from, the post-COVID tightening of the labor market, when everyone's been having a hard time hiring people. You've also got baby boomers leaving the job market en masse. So that's tightened it up. And then I've even heard from one of my suppliers actually pointed out they're having a hard time hiring people for their manufacturing floor because their state legalized pot, and they can't find people that can pass drug tests, because they still don't want people and it's still their company policy. You fail a drug test, well, they can't find, since their state legalized marijuana, they can't find people. So these have all tightened the math here is pretty simple. When you have more things being automated in general and more sophisticated automation layered on top of that, it creates more control devices and more connections for those control devices, and all those add up to a lot more enclosures. So yeah, we are seeing growth not only from the smart side of the making automation smarter with more feedback, more sensors, more things that are more parameters being controlled, but just more automation in general.
I see. And so with this increase in automation, with this increase in digital technology, is it the case that many of these new digital components do require also different types of enclosures than equipment in the past may have? And can you share some more details with me on some of the enclosure features that are currently trending in this changing industry landscape?
Well, it is happening, but you got to kind of keep it in perspective when talking about these things. Is that Ultimately, the enclosures is just a box. Okay, and it's just a box. So it's not like there's a lot of great new innovations in enclosures coming out. There are more specialized ones, but what is happening um, is, we still see the big cabinets, um, but you're seeing a lot more growth in the smaller, more specialized um, uh, enclosures that you know, may go on to a single robot or some single component. As everything becomes more decentralized, you get a lot more smaller enclosures. And then when you get into smaller enclosures, and a lot more of them, you want them more a lot more inexpensive. So you get in a lot more plastic ones than metal ones. It's easy to make things small out of plastic. Sometimes it can actually be sometimes hard to make a small box out of metal. So we're seeing a lot of growth and shift toward small non-metallics. And then there are some specialty ones within that, like I said, for circuit, just to hold a single circuit board or just hold a mount a single sensor. Um, but like I said, those are niche kind of things along the way, even though there's volumes of those being out there. But like I said, you gotta keep it in perspective. They're still just a rectangular box, and they still do the same thing. And ultimately, it's like I said, it's a box to isolate something from the outside world. Um, and that part hasn't really changed. They're still,
Yeah.
and you're not making them different shapes because round ones don't mount very well. Spheres don't mount very well, and so they're still just nice rectangular prism boxes. So, um, but we are seeing a shift in the balance of what's being bought out there.
So, so it's a pretty standardized product. It is an enclosure is an enclosure is an enclosure. It's all just sort of boxes, but there are some different common types, right? Particularly when we get into the different sorts of materials they're made of, and things like that. So talk to me more broadly about some of the most common types of enclosures out there and the different applications they're most likely to be used in.
Right. Okay. Yeah. When we talk about types, you're really getting largely into function is one way to categorize these. The most basic function, it is, and really the one that's been around the longest is your what we call just a junction box. Usually very simple enclosure, no panel inside or anything. All you're doing is it's an intersection for pulling wires from some conduits coming in to conduits going out. Like I said, it may just be you just need an intermediate place to pull the wires through because it's up too far, or you need to split divide the wires to route them to different places. Like I said, basically just a traffic intersection. That's the most basic type. From there, the next thing up would be what we call just a general purpose cabinet. This is where you start mounting types of equipment in there. You typically have a sub panel or DIN rails or things to mount. These are your most versatile, generally your most versatile type. They may be wall mounted, or larger ones be floor mounted or freestanding. Can be go from small to big depending on what kind of equipment you have in them, how much wiring you got going through them, what you're doing there. And then sort of a subset of that is you have your rack cabinets or sometimes just racks, and this is for rack mounted equipment, which we see a lot with server rooms. Sound servers and sound equipment are sort of the original users of these, and equipment that comes with its own chassis. So sometimes you don't even actually need a cabinet per se, except maybe just to keep somebody from pushing the buttons on it. It's, what's the most important is the vertical racks that these screw into, and you build those up. So that's a subset there. Another subset there area that's grown for us recently are your sanitary or hygienic enclosures. And these will be used mostly in food applications as as more and more food preparation type industries become more and more automated. Especially ones dealing with meats and dairy and those type of things. Making potato chips has been automated for a while, but you don't but you don't need quite the same level of sophistication there as you do automating a chicken processing plant. Okay, and the same washdown. And so as those type food areas become more and more automated, well, we got to have more and more enclosures for those. And so you have your sanitary, your hygienic enclosures that can be washed down, clean. They're constructed in such a way that they don't have any surfaces that will collect water. You can't have paint that can chip off. They have special gaskets that if the gasket starts to deteriorate, the gaskets are bright blue because no food is naturally that color. No. And so you can see if there's contamination. So there's, that's another subset that has a little bit of specialty area. Another group of water group enclosures are what we refer to as operator interface type enclosures. These are the ones where you have someone that's operating the machine that's needs to be able to both receive feedback from the machine and give it commands. So you'll have touch screens and push buttons, etc., mounted on those keyboards, whatever you're using, for the human to communicate with the machine. And so these come in a variety of either standalone consoles or pedestal mounted consolates, pendant mounted small enclosures that can be swung into place and moved around, or even just a simple small enclosure with holes for a push button in it. You have another type you have is for for power systems. You have to have disconnects. You have to be able to shut the power off, and that's a specialty type of enclosure. So you have a disconnect handle on the outside, so you don't have to open up the cabinet, because you want to be able to, for those kind of things, you want to be able to de-energize it before you open the cabinet. Not only from a convenience standpoint, but from from a standpoint of preventing arc flash and those kind of things. And then so we talked about smaller and the proliferation of smaller and smaller enclosures. There's a group that I loosely call them mini cases, and they're just little small, usually plastic or cast aluminum boxes that fit in the palm of your hand. They can be mounted just about anywhere. They're there to hold just a few devices, or just a few, it can be used as a small junction box. Very versatile, very inexpensive. And as automation becomes more decentralized and smarter, you see more and more of these being used. You can't put a big wall mount enclosure on a small robot. But you do need these type things. And of course, like I said, there's all kind of specialized ones, like I said, just for holding a single circuit board or a single a single sensor of some type, just to mount and protect those kind of things. But that's, from a functional standpoint, that kind of covers the spectrum of the enclosure world.
I see. Yeah, and it's a very thorough overview. Now, the one other thing I do want to ask on this point is, are you seeing an increased demand for more customized enclosures as well, with specific cutouts for wires, antenna, and other purposes like that? Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Well, we're not seeing it directly because right now we don't have a program in place currently. We're working on one to actually address that ourselves. We are working on one because yes, that is something that is more and more in demand in the marketplace, and it's not so much more from the fact there's so many more different kinds of things to be mounted on there. It's simply a fact that well, every enclosure for it to be enclosed, it's closed.
Yeah.
And with few exceptions, practically every enclosure has to have some hole cut in it somewhere. It's got to have one way for the wires to go in and the wires to go out, or whatever. So but especially when you get into any kind of rectangular holes, and with between touchscreen type devices, or any kind of larger rectangular devices, or even on larger enclosures that have to have that generate a lot of heat and have to be cooled, mounting fans and air conditioners on those rectangular holes are much more difficult to cut. Punching a round hole for a conduit or even a push button or anything like that is fairly simple. Cutting rectangular holes is hard, especially, and the larger the enclosure, the harder it is to do that. So we are seeing more demand on that. And we're working, and I know from talking to my suppliers, that's something they push to get their capabilities for that out there, because it's in demand. The end users of the enclosures don't want to spend the time cutting those holes if they don't have to. They would rather have it show up with the holes in it. For those of us that have ever tried to had to put mount an air conditioner on the side of a large freestanding enclosure, you're having to cut fairly significant size holes in those things in sheet metal. The only way to do it in the field basically is lay the thing down on its side, ride it like a horse with a jigsaw, and it will rattle your teeth out trying to, when you're trying to. It is not a pleasant part of anyone's day to do that even once. And so and the bigger the hole you got to cut, the worse it is. And so but yes, as that is something that the enclosure industry in general has worked to address, and the manufacturers, that capability is out there. Now it's just a matter of bringing it to the masses and scaling and making it economical, for the manufacturers can charge where it doesn't cost the manufacturers a cost prohibitive amount. They don't have to charge a cost prohibitive amount to the end user in order to do that. And that's what a lot of the industry is working toward.
I see. And could you potentially talk to me in a little bit more detail about the advances that are allowing that to be scaled, that are allowing the design and manufacturing process for those customized enclosures to be more easily carried out and delivered to end users?
there's a couple of avenues that happens in, and it depends on. There's two basic ways to put those hole for a manufacturer to deliver a customized one with customized holes in it. The first way is pulling a completed stock enclosure off the shelf and cutting holes in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are uh, I know of two of the larger, really the two largest enclosure manufacturers in the world both have developed specialized machines. They are basically customized CNC machines for doing exactly that, and they actually sell them to other. They sell them to distributors and even other manufacturers. So that's that avenue. So so rather than a person having to hand cut all these things and lay them out, they can mount these enclosures on in this machine and program it to cut holes in completed enclosures. Right. The second way to get those in there takes it takes a little longer to get delivery, is to actually cut the holes in the flat sheet before you bend it and weld it into an enclosure. So the ones that don't have the ability to cut the boxes, after they're made, that's the direction they go. That's something that is fairly simple for them to do. It's just a matter of tightening up their their manufacturing processes and their schedules to be able to insert those into their production schedule. That includes all the program that has to be done for the extra cutting, and route them through quickly and efficiently. So those are more of a that's more of a manufacturing engineering type problem for them, as far as shortening the cycle time that it takes for them to go from the customer submits a design, get it into the production queue, and get enclosure all the way through the production queue from a flat sheet to a sheet with holes cut in it to bent up into an enclosure to welded, painted, doors put on it, hardware in a box out the door. So those are kind of the two avenues that the manufacturers are working on, and some actually have do some of both.
I see. So, Jody, I think you've really answered all of my questions. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up, I think we can go ahead and bring this to a conclusion.
I can't really think of a whole lot.
Well, that's okay. You provided me with so much, so you don't need to think of more. You've given me and our viewers a lot of fantastic information.
Well, good. I hope to. Like I said, it's working it with enclosures. It's there is stuff going on, but like I said, we always have to remind ourselves these are just boxes. And working at AutomationDirect, I frequently tell some of my colleagues, I say, well, I'm working with the dumbest product line we have. It's a box. They've got all these other wonderful drives and PLCs and manuals this thick, and we've got a box telling you how to screw it into a wall. That's, but like I said, but there is a lot of variety to it, and of course there's a lot of sizes. So they have the more complexity, and I just have a lot of part numbers. I've got a whole lot of things that are different by this much from the next one. So,
and of course, it remains an essential product that everyone.
It is absolutely essential. I mean, and I guess if there is one thing I would add is when anyone is deciding on, making an enclosure purchase. Obviously, the one thing that, and everyone knows to do this is, you have to size it get the right size so that everything fits. That's the easy part. The one thing that's something that customers sometimes struggle with is forgetting the why. And the why of enclosures is simple. Is because you don't want the components inside the enclosure, to come in contact or be involved with it, with whatever is outside the enclosure. So ultimately, that's what you're really basing on everything from your material selection to what kind of access, doors, latches, etc. you have on there, what type of ratings, be it NEMA ratings, IP ratings, all that is wrapped up in understanding that relationship. There's something in the box that we either don't want people to touch or don't want to get damaged, and there's things on the outside, be it people, be it rain, water, dust, whatever, that we don't want getting inside the box. And that's all enclosures is a means to isolate one from the other, or each one from the other one, in most cases. And so when deciding on an enclosure, that's the most important thing for users to really think about is what's in the box, what's outside the box, and what's going to be required to keep them separate.
I see. So this has been a fantastic interview. It's been very nice talking to you, Jody. And I want to thank you one more time for taking the time to sit down with me. And I want to thank all of our viewers as well for taking the time to sit down with us.
Now, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this talk. So,
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.